All right, we're back. This is CSIS 2200. This is part number 2. We're at chapter number 9. We're talking about global information systems, or ERP systems. We left off with talking about the growth of the internet and how it's impacted our lives in such a dramatic way. And, in the areas of things like we do a lot of, I don't know about most of you who are listening, but I do a lot of shopping. I book appointments. I book my travel. I learn all sorts of stuff. I read, I research, I communicate with family and friends and students, and I socialize, I work, I bank, I entertain, I stream. Oh, like what don't you do on the internet? And as the internet has evolved and continues to evolve, it keeps getting faster and easier. We seem to be putting more stuff and things are getting just better and better. So companies have had to adapt to this, obviously, and when you're dealing with globalization and companies are globalizing, you need to create regional sites and presence. So when you're talking about a company like Hewlett Packard or Costco, Costco is a good example because Costco now is kind of a global company, goes around the world. You type in Costco.ca, but when you're in the States, you would type in Costco.us or .com. If you're in the UK, of course, Costco.uk and so on. So companies have to create that presence in their regional areas, even though they're global companies. So they create that localization of a website. They create their own website, of course, because you want the same currency. Plus, there's different products in different countries. So the products that are sold in Canada are much different than the products that are sold in Japan at Costco. So the websites would have to be customized just for those. When you're dealing with a globalization system, an ERP system, and you're dealing with the websites, you're able to customize it based on the geographical location. So if you're working for someone like Costco at their head office, you could be working for the Costco Canada globalized office and working with their, let's say you're in the CSIS program and you're doing web development, you'd be working with their ERP system to just work specifically with their with that one right there. So a question I kind of came up with is like, with this global internet, why do we need, so many traditional companies like retail outlets, for example? So I put a link in here if you want, you can have a look. Like, why do we need retail outlets like shopping centers? Sometimes we need things to purchase like right away, like food, for example. I mean, that makes sense. We're not going to, but even food, I mean, we can have large distribution centers within regional areas, order online and have it shipped within hours or within the day, at least when it comes to food. Universities and colleges, this is another one, especially now that we're working online at the time of this recording, is so much education can be delivered on the internet. We can do this with these videos. We can do it with online chats. We can do it with online assessments, etc. Now, granted, there are limitations with online compared to face-to-face. I personally like to have what they call a hybrid educational model, where I see my students at least once a week for a few hours, and then I provide the materials online for them to go and do their work. So there's a lot of companies that are kind of disappearing because of globalization and the internet, how it's come together. And I think you're going to see this impacting retail is probably the most significant being impacted currently, but education is going to be probably another one. And even other things like medicine. Like I had to go see the doctor, but they didn't see me. They just, they have an app now to go see the doctor, which is kind of interesting. I mean, dentistry, I mean, obviously you can't do dentistry over the internet, at least not yet, but I think that one will be still pretty safe for the time being. But there's so many industries that are being disrupted. And I guess my point of telling you this is when you're selecting a career, you might want to really think about what is the future of that career? What's the long-term outcome of that career? If you're in marketing, there's still a lot of online marketing. Can that be automated? Currently, not really. So, there's a lot of tools that help and augment marketing, but there still needs to be marketing people. Finance, the same thing. Accounting, kind of the same thing. But with artificial intelligence and quantum computing, there's going to be another, revolution, I think, that's going to happen on the internet with computers. As as computers, as the internet has impacted our lives so dramatically in the past 20 years, quantum computing and AI is going to do another drastic quantum shift in how we work. But we'll have to see how that turns out. Oh, this is an interesting piece of data here. It's about how much how many languages are spoken on the internet, and this is a chart that I had got, and I didn't cite my source. I should have cited the source for this, and I did this about a year ago. I'll have to go back and try to look up where I found this. But 25% of the internet is English, which 20 years ago it was like 90% was English. So as globalization becomes more and more prevalent online and accessible to more and more people, of course, English is going to diminish over time, which is interesting. Chinese or Mandarin is number 2, which kind of makes sense because of the number of people. Now, I'm surprised that India or Punjabi or other languages aren't in here, but maybe because a lot of people in India speak English. I'm not sure. But kind of an interesting statistic. But as a result, because we're dealing with a global economy and other countries, of course, communication can be a factor. Now, the nice thing about the internet and these tools is that we've got a lot of translation tools. And I've used these translation tools, and for the most part, they're not bad, and I can get my point across. They're not perfect, but they're getting better and better. And again, with quantum computing and AI, this is going to become extremely good at communicating. So I think this is going to be something that they're going to be able to alleviate in the near future, is the language barrier to communicate with other countries. Now, when we're talking globalization, there's in different countries, a lot of countries and people don't have computers. They have mobile phones because they're relatively cheap. And as a result, a lot of globalization apps have come out. So some people, they can transfer money now from country to country using a variety of different apps. These are the apps that were in the book. I don't, of course, use any of these because they're in different countries. I would use something like PayPal or Square or MasterCard to transfer money, or maybe Western Union to do that. Finding jobs online. Again, if you're going to go internationally, you can look for jobs in other countries, which is a great feature. Or, of course, social networking and data collection, etc. So there's different apps that provide all sorts of advantages for people in other countries that don't have PCs necessarily. All right, getting back to the overview kind of what a global information system is. Again, like an ERP system is, of course, they have to work across different countries. And as a result, they have to have a clear understanding of the local laws and customs. So if you are in a situation where you're working and you need to communicate with another regional office, of course, this is something that you should be aware of, that there are, when you're transmitting data, is there any rules about that data? And I think I've shared with you with education, we can't share student data outside of Canada. So we can't pass student marks or even your address. Only thing we can correlate together for data is your first name and your last name, which is technically not private. But if we correlate that with your birth date, that's private data and it cannot be transferred beyond our border in an educational. So I've got to be very aware of that as an instructor. So when I create things on my Blackboard or if I create an assignment, I have to be aware of that. So if a student is in another country, they should let me know that and then make me aware if there's any potential issues relative to that. So let's say someone's taking a course in another country than Canada, and they're transmitting their assignments. That assignment has to go through multiple countries before it lands in Canada. So if that's a problem, we have to create a virtual private network to alleviate this problem. So just a little note there to keep that in mind, because it might have an impact on some students. Now, that could have to do with a student's current situation, their political situation in their country, and They may not want maybe their government to know that they're studying abroad for some reason. So it could have an impact. So these systems have a clear communication channel with their other regional offices. So, for example, Microsoft has a head office in Seattle, Redmond, Washington, and we have a regional office here in Vancouver. So they've got the same ERP system, which is, of course, Microsoft Dynamics that they use to communicate and to share information. SAP is another ERP system that does the same thing. So they would have companies that use their SAP and probably all their subsidiaries that they're also connected to. So it's not just the company and their regional companies, but it's also partnering companies that they work with. Somebody made that it's not their company, but they buy a lot of products from their supplier, for example, or their distributor, or maybe they're shipping a product and they work closely with a subsidiary like UPS or Federal Express. It would be helpful if those companies used the same ERP system so they could better communicate between them. So these GIS systems just allow companies to gather and easily gather the information consistently, across borders, store their information in a similar way, or how to manipulate or do data analytics, or do some business intelligence, how to transmit the information to different countries, across different cultures and geographic borders. So that's what these GIS systems focus on. So one of the key advantages that they do is they help to better coordinate, the supply chain, the value chain of how products move from different company to different company before they get to the consumer. And anytime you can smoothen out the communication and the data flow, that means you're going to get a product to market faster. And of course, the faster you get it to market, the faster you can sell it, the more profit you're going to make. All right, another component of a GIS system, of course, is just like a managing information system, we've got a database. But databases now we're talking about globally, which is, you're dealing with multiple countries, different languages. So there's a lot more challenges there when you're designing and trying to implement some global database structure across different countries. An easy example of this for most people to relate to would be something like, when you enter in a date of, let's say, a sale of a transaction, or when something's going to be shipped, or etc. Knowing the company's standards for data. So things like date changes. Month, day, year is an American. Day, month, year is Canadian, although a lot of Canadians follow the American model, which is month, day, year. Another one is postal codes and zip codes. So in Canada, we use postal codes, and in the US, they use zip codes. The currency value, here's another one. Like if you're, in the States, it's a dollar, and in Japan, it's the yen, and in the Philippines, it's the peso, and in China, it's the RMB or the yuan. So there are a lot of different variations with databases in different countries. Now, there's an organization called the International Standards Organization that has standardized a lot of this, so that when companies are creating GIS systems, they have to conform. And how does this pertain to you as a student? Well, if you're working in a system and you're typing data into a computer, you need to be aware of where that data is going. And is the data being entered in for Canada, or is it being entered in as Canada and then converted to another country? Or do you have to type it in for that particular country? Like you might need to type in the purchase quantity in a particular currency, like you're trading in US dollars. As you can imagine, typing in the wrong currency for a particular product would have a dramatic impact or error. All right, so keep in mind that these global information systems, when they're talking about global databases, there's a lot of subtle differences between countries, and they have to work and convert things all the time. These GIS systems, they also, share information and share technologies and outsource. Okay, so they put in this in the book. They're talking about companies can outsource work that's not available within the company. And I've already talked about this. There's a website called Fiverr, and another company called, let me see here if I can remember. Oh yeah, the other one I was looking for was called Upwork. And this allows you to communicate with people that have expertise that your company may not have. So you're getting sort of top quality, what they call freelancers, that perform specific types of jobs. So if you have a job that you need to do, let's say you need to design some kind of advertising campaign, but you don't have an advertising department in your company, you can put on that job onto this website, and you can compete for people from around the world that have that expertise to bid on that job and propose what they would do for you. So, there's a lot of companies that use this. And if you look at this, these are all global companies: Microsoft, Airbnb, General Electric, and so on across the board here. These are testimonials and also how much they charge. So you can hire this person and you can read through their resume. You can hire them at $40 per hour. And you guys can also do this yourself. You guys can join as an expert. Maybe you have an expertise in a particular area. You can advertise on here, and you can get hired to work internationally as a freelancer on the internet and not be restricted to geographical locations. So very interesting concept here that I want to make sure you guys were aware of. All right, let's move on to the next slide here. EA is another company, Electronic Arts. You guys might have heard of them. They have their head offices here in Burnaby, in Vancouver, Canada, or Burnaby. And I applied for a job here a few years ago, working on doing a contract. And when I was sitting in the lobby for the job interview, there were people from all over the world actually had come in for this job interview, but they were going to be working in other areas. But the company is literally filled with people from around the world, and their expertise in electronic arts is distributed around the world. So this company is very well aligned with GIS systems and communications. So I put a link in here if you're interested to have a look at electronic arts. I didn't get the job, and primarily because when I was looking for a job, at the time, I got hired at Douglas, and I chose to work at Douglas because it was a longer, contract, and I was more interested in the education. The job I was looking at Electronic Arts was an educational manager to harvest subject matter experts to collect their knowledge and to create a repository for future developers. And it was a fascinating project, but it wasn't a long-term project. It was a one-year contract, so I didn't take it. I wasn't even offered it, to be honest. But it was a great experience going for the interview and going through that process. All right, some of the key components of a GIS system, of course, as I've mentioned it already, is the ability to communicate to different, cities, different countries. If you're using Microsoft Dynamics, for example, they use a communication tool called Skype for Business. Some of you might have heard of it. When you get a job, there's a good chance that they have Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics, and they'll be using Skype for Business as their communication system. So you'll need to use their voice. It's called a VoIP, voice over IP, and uses the internet to do that. So transmission technology, a lot of these require high bandwidth, and they take advantage of these fiber optic connections and trunks now, called gigapops. This is just how much bandwidth can be pushed through when you're dealing with large companies and you're running your platforms on the cloud. And that's primarily why the transmission technology is so important, because a lot of these services are being delivered as a software as a service, an SaaS. So when you're working in a company, you're dealing with some kind of managed information system or ERP system that's being delivered from the cloud. So they need super high speed gigapop type of bandwidth, which is usually delivered through fiber optics. Although 5G now is coming out, which will be wireless, and that's going to be an exciting development in the whole evolution of the internet here. The network architecture they're using, if you were asked, it would be a mesh, which is pretty much the internet. The internet uses a mesh network so that the traffic on the internet can take multiple routes, which have all these connecting points, which when you look at it looks like a mesh of wires and connected networks. And then finally, the information sharing is used through a cloud-based repository. So that's where you're storing your information on the cloud. You really don't even know geographically sometimes where it's located, although the IT department probably does because they have to conform to certain laws and regulations. So one of the key objectives with these ERP systems or global information systems is that all the components have some kind of standardized software and hardware. So a lot of time, but not always. Like I've been in companies that, they'll have HP computers at this company, and another computer they might have Lenovo or some other hardware. But the hardware components are usually the same. They all use like an i5 processor with 8 gigs of RAM and a certain amount of hard drive space. The software is probably even more important that it's consistent. So especially when you're talking about a global information system, you want all the subsidiaries and partner companies to be using the same one. That's why there's only a few of them out there on the market. You got Microsoft Dynamics 365, you've got SAP, you've got Oracle. There's a few out there, and then there's a lot of smaller kind of niche ones that are out there. So if you guys do a search on ERP systems, you'll probably find there's probably 20 or 30 different ones that are out there on the market, but the top three are the ones I just mentioned. So using the same software in other countries can be complicated. It depends on the country and whether they have access to those software resources. That's kind of the nice thing about that Microsoft is such a large company, because every company in the world or every country in the world knows Microsoft and has access to it if they can afford to purchase it. But it's not always the same. And what happens sometimes is companies merge together. When companies merge, sometimes they have different ERP systems. And during the merging process, a lot of times companies will negotiate which ERP system will become the dominant one that the other one has to adopt. And that's another common process that occurs. Okay, well, we're at 22 minutes, so I think I'll take a break, and I'll see you guys in part number 3.